Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today we're going to talk about the Dwarfs. You see, the Dwarfs are getting some attention in Thrones of Decay. This is going to be their first DLC since, wow, the King and the Warlord. So we need to start looking and talking about the Dwarfs, and hopefully they'll get a big rework. You see, the Dwarfs have already had basically 2 reworks in the lifespan of Warhammer 2. The problem is that since they were not focused of paid content, they didn't really get that much attention. So this could change in Thrones of Decay, as we know that that DLC is linked towards the Empire, Nurgle, and the Dwarfs. Yes, Shadows of Change was not great, but I'm imagining that, well, the recent happenings have made Creative Assembly learn that they need to put in a little bit more bang for your buck. Now, an FLC isn't attached to a DLC, it's a free update, but really, let's be honest, the race updates that everyone got, you know, Kislev and Cathay, whilst decent, isn't really enough for factions that desperately need quite a bit of help. And I'll be completely honest with you, the past few weeks I've been thinking a lot about the Dwarfs because I've been kind of worried, so I just want to throw out some ideas that I've had which I feel would make the Dwarfs a lot better. Creative Assembly do take ideas from the community, we've seen this before, and I'm not saying that we know better than Creative Assembly, I just want to offer some ideas just in case they need some extra stuff for the Dwarfs, because, well, you know, it's a faction since game 1, right? Let's have them finished once and for all. I mean, it would be nice if they got multiple DLCs, but it would be nice as a race as a whole would have their own things, right? Now, we're going to start off with one thing which I know is likely going to annoy some people, so I just want to get it out of the way first, and that would be, first up, looking towards the Kara's Anchor. You see, the Kara's Anchor is the kingdom of the Dwarfs. Loads of different Karaks found across, mostly around the Old World, the World's Edge Mountains, and going into the Badlands. They're all linked up, and it's a network, and this is why I believe something akin to the Geomantic Web should be added into the Dwarfs, but only through stuff that is historically theirs, instead of, well, you know, like the Geomantic Web normally, where it just spreads from capital city to capital city. The idea would work in a very similar sense to, well, actually, Alariel, where as long as Dwarfs hold those Karaks, you get some bonuses. If you don't, you start going into bits of neutral ground or even negatives. It depends on how much is being owned by other forces instead of the Dwarfs. This will give you incentivization to first up, either confederate or ally up with Karak Kadrin, say for example if you're playing as Fulgrim, and also all the other dwarf factions like Karak Hearn, Karak Azul, all the ones that still up and running. But it'll also give you incentivization to go up to the northern World's Edge Mountains and take those back, as they are right now under control by usually Azag at a certain point, or down to Black Crag, all the holds that are historically part of your territories. You'd still be able to control other areas, but you'd get more bonuses by going into the actual Karaks or the Kara's Anchor. So you've united the Kara's Anchor, what else is there for you to do? Well, there are other places which are historic to you which have been lost through time. That are the areas of the Norse Dwarfs, some territories in the Mountains of Morn, and yeah, I mean, there's one lost Karak down there in the areas of the Tomb Kings. You'd get the full 100% bonuses if those were there, but they're attached, right? So they won't give you negatives if they fall under someone else. It's kind of like having frosting added to your cake, and this gives you reason to expand as much as you humanly can. The bonuses themselves wouldn't be that big. It would be extra growth, maybe some extra control, more movement range within Dwarfs in the territories of the Kara's Anchor, hell, maybe even plus 200% underway movement, so you can move around quickly, essentially using the Kara's Anchor and all the underway tunnels connected to it as a faster way of movement. Something like that would be kind of cool, and it just adds in a little bit of flavor whilst also, you know, being very useful for you. This means that you can move around your armies fairly quickly and launch invasions without having like a teleport system. I know some people would like that, but I feel like this kind of works out quite well. One thing is fairly certain, the tech tree needs to be changed. I love the fact that the Dwarfs have a massive tech tree, don't get me wrong, but the fact of the matter is, it is huge, it is just overbearing on the eyes, and now we have a really good system with the Chaos Dwarfs. We can have them in multiple sections, and I think that's what needs to be done here. Yes, this isn't the most exciting thing about a rework, but visually it'll be better, and it'll be easier to pick up some techs. Have one for warfare, have one for religion, and have one for guilds and trade. Again, I know it's not very exciting, but if you look at the current dwarf tech tree, it is massive, and it should stay massive, but just split into different windows as to just allow ease of access. Newer players are probably trying out the dwarfs for the first time and going, what the hell is all this? And yeah, I understand why that happens. There is a lot there, and it can get way too much. I think this is the largest tech tree, actually. Very close by is the Skaven, I think, but this definitely is too much. By that, I mean it's just cluttered. Now, there should be some sort of focus around guilds. I imagine that the next DLC, Thrones of Decay, is going to have some guild stuff when it comes to the dwarf side, mostly because we've heard a little bit of a hint, which is likely going to be Malachi. This would be as the legendary hero, so why not have some focus on guilds for all the faction, a system and buildings which could be a permanent choice, where you'd make the choice in provincial capitals once around the time that you get to tier 3 in your settlement. Rather than progressing to tier 4 or tier 5, there would be multiple options of tier 4, and then it would go straight to a tier 5 option, and this would be an engineer's guild, an artisan's guild, and then finally a warrior's guild. Now, yes, there's a lot of guilds when it comes to the dwarves, but I don't imagine that they'd represent everyone, because I mean, that would be a bit too much, right? So by doing this, you could then be provided with a new line of buildings. These buildings would focus on basically that, you know? So engineers' buildings would be focusing on unlocking the engineer units, then also buffing up your war machines. Your artisan guild would focus around economic stuff, you know, so extra growth, extra money, control, all the usual stuff. And then your warriors guild would focus on warriors, right? Anything on foot, anything that is not considered a war machine in the dwarven roster. Now, this is actually entirely possible because we have seen this in a Total War Saga Troy, where after you do one of those grand missions to unlock one of the big beasties, you also get unique buildings attached to the cultists for those big beasts. So this was the whole thing with Cerberus, the Hydra, and all that usual thing. So the technology is perfectly there. We've already seen a bunch of stuff ported over from Troy into Warhammer. Something like this would work rather well, because this means that you get loads of faction-wide bonuses, or even just region-wide bonuses, or a little bit of a mix of both, and you'd get some new buildings. Yes, again, not the most exciting thing, but it allows you to tailor your Kara's Anchor, again, focusing only on the Kara's Anchor to be able to build up guilds to your specific needs and standards. Now, there's two things to discuss here. One, yes, this has to be permanent because it would be adding in new buildings and so on. I imagine that would cause a lot of issues with code if it would freely swap around, because you can't really swap that much. Well, you can't swap at all when it comes to Troy, when it comes to getting these unique buildings. And second, I know a lot of people would be saying, well, yeah, but the Engineers Guild needs to be much more. There needs to be mechanics attached to them and so on, like Ickett's Workshop. And yes, I know some people would like that, but I imagine that that would be tied to a Engineer's character. So whatever the dwarf character might be, if we get an engineer-focused character in the Thrones of Decay. We don't actually know, but I'm assuming it should be focused on that since, well, we already do have a Slayer character. It would be kind of cool to see a Slayer-focused DLC because there's a lot of really cool stuff, but I imagine they'll focus on engineering just to kind of show off what the dwarfs are capable of, and that would be a perfect example of bringing in the Thunder Barge and a few other things that are kind of missing, like rune golems and stuff like that. Now, I did speak about this in another video, so I'm only going to mention it briefly, but Rune Forging needs to be a thing, and just use the whole Baba Yaga mechanic. Yeah, I know, Mother Stank is her actual name, but I'm still going to call her Baba Yaga. But yeah, this is kind of the best way to do it. The video itself can be found on the channel. It's literally use this and turn it into either blessings and cursings to just rune of aggression, rune of defense, and make that more dwarf style, because at the end of the day, it works really, really well. Obviously, it would have to not be as strong as the Witch's Hut, which to me just is too much. It is horrendously overpowered, and yeah, then you can have some fun with it, right? Being able to make runes that would only affect your forces, and you can use that to buff up your forces in case that you're getting into a really big fight and you need some more armor piercing damage, or you need a little bit more speed, a little bit more vigor. All that type of stuff is just kind of cool. And yes, I know a lot of people don't like reskin stuff, but this isn't really an issue when it's one, free content, and two, it makes logical sense. I would much rather have something reskinned and reused when it's for free content and make it useful than not have it at all, right? Now, well, yes, I know this doesn't fix all the problems with the dwarfs. A lot of that falls towards their roster. Yeah, I imagine that we will get some new units with Thrones of Decay, hopefully more than 3. Hopefully more than 3. Stuff that I imagine could fill out the roster and make the dwarfs a bit more enjoyable. Obviously, rune golems, thunder barges, goblin hewers would be amazing. You know, if we only get 3 units, which I really hope is not the case, I imagine those will be the main 3 things. But there's stuff like, you know, Doom Seekers, a few different weapons teams and so on, which could just be nice adding to the cake. Maybe even a Slayer Lord and a Slayer Hero would be fantastic, even if it's a machine-focused DLC, which I imagine is going to be mostly focused on machinery, but having the option is always better than not having it, right? And I don't want to talk about like possible units, we've done that already. I just want to talk about the rework stuff, because I feel like that's enough to just kind of give the dwarfs a bit of fresh air, something a bit more fun. The stuff I'm suggesting here should be available to all the dwarves, right? This would be Fulgrim, Belagar. It doesn't matter if this was DLC or FLC content or even base game from Warhammer 1, it would just flesh out the dwarf race to be unique in its own way, rather than DLC content focusing on other characters and adding that stuff to them. I think it's about time that these races were brought to a standard of Warhammer 3, because one thing that Creative Assembly went on record saying is that they wanted all the races in Warhammer 1 to get the reworks to Warhammer 2 standard, but then Warhammer 3 has come out and there's a new standard. All the races should now be put into the standard of Warhammer 3. Obviously, I don't have all the answers. I'm just putting some suggestions out because I feel like this could help them out. But if you guys have your own ideas, put them in the comments below. Creative Assembly, do check out these videos, which I always find kind of awkward. But yeah, you know, that's the perfect time to start throwing ideas out. This DLC I'm expecting to be released around December or so. So it would be time to start throwing out ideas. Maybe they haven't gone into devlog just yet. We don't know if that's the case. And yeah, there's time to fluff out the patch alongside the DLC. We'll talk about the DLC stuff another day. But the idea is we need to kind of work together here, right? We need to be united here. Not just ourselves as viewers, ourselves as players, but Creative Assembly. We want the best for this game as much as they do. They want to make money. We want a good game to play constantly. So I think this is a good idea. But let me know again what you think. Have a great day, guys. I'll see you all again very, very soon.